Some crimes send a chill through an entire community, not just because of how they happen, but because of who they happen to. It was October 7th, 2023. The world kept moving, but for one couple, everything was about to change. A day that started with routine ended in horror. A woman walks into a barbershop on a quiet Saturday afternoon, expecting nothing more than a routine visit, but within moments, she is gunned down in cold blood. Right there in broad daylight. The man responsible? Someone she once trusted, someone she once loved. This is the chilling story of Tiffany Natifa Wade, a beloved businesswoman whose life was taken inside a North Philadelphia barbershop, and the dark truth behind the man who pulled the Tiffany Wade had spent years building herself up. She wasn't just an entrepreneur, she was a figure of influence, someone people looked up to. But influence and success can't always protect you from the people closest to you. Her life was entangled with Armand Hilton, a man with a past, a man who had already seen the inside of a prison cell. Their relationship had been complicated, but no one could have predicted how it would end. That afternoon, Tiffany walked into the barbershop, unaware that her final moments were just minutes away. What followed was a brutal, execution-style killing right in front of witnesses. Armand didn't hesitate. He fired multiple times, making sure there was no chance she would survive. And then he vanished. But why? What could drive a man to such an act of cold-blooded murder? The answer lies in a toxic mix of obsession, money, and control. There were disputes, disagreements over property, finances, and the life they had once shared. But was that enough to justify what he did? Or was there something darker at play? This is the horrifying case of Armand Hilton. Tiffany Wade had a presence that was impossible to ignore. At 40 years old, she carried herself with a confidence that was both magnetic and inspiring. She wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was a woman who had carved out her own lane, a self-made entrepreneur, a social media influencer, and a figure of strength within her community. Her story was one of resilience, of turning challenges into opportunities, and never allowing circumstances to define her. Born and raised in Philadelphia, Tiffany had always possessed an undeniable drive. She wasn't the type to settle for less than what she believed she deserved. She had ambition in her blood, and she spent years working toward the kind of independence that few truly achieve. She built her own businesses, leveraged her influence on social media, and positioned herself as a role model for women looking to take control of their own lives. People were drawn to her energy. She had that rare ability to walk into a room and command attention without demanding it. It wasn't just about how she looked, though she was undeniably beautiful. It was about how she carried herself. She exuded confidence, but not in a way that was intimidating. She made people feel seen, heard, and valued. Her friends described her as the kind of person who lifted others up, who offered advice without judgment, and who always found a way to make those around her believe in themselves. But success came with its own pressures. The more Tiffany built, the more she had to protect. Running businesses wasn't easy, and neither was maintaining an image of strength when, behind closed doors, she was dealing with struggles most people never saw. One of those struggles was her relationship with Armand Hilton. Armand, 44, was from Chester, Pennsylvania, a city just outside Philadelphia. Their relationship was complicated, one of those on-again, off-again romances that seemed impossible to fully walk away from. He had a past, one that included time in prison, but Tiffany wasn't the type to judge someone for their mistakes. She believed in second chances. She believed in seeing the best in people. In the beginning, things with Armand weren't all bad. There were moments of genuine affection, of shared dreams and whispered promises about the future. He made her feel special, like she had someone in her corner who truly understood her. But over time, the cracks began to show. Friends started noticing a change in Tiffany. The woman who had always been so sure of herself, so full of life, began carrying a different kind of weight. It was subtle at first, a hesitation in her voice when she spoke about Armand, a slight withdrawal from the social circles she once thrived in. She was still Tiffany, still strong, still successful, but there was something beneath the surface, something pressing down on her in a way that wasn't easy to explain. Love can turn toxic before you even realize it's happening. One moment everything feels normal, even good. The next, you're looking back at the pieces, trying to figure out when exactly things started to fall apart. For Tiffany, the turning point had been slow, almost invisible to those who weren't paying close attention. The arguments became more frequent, the tension became harder to ignore, and then there were the disputes over money, over property, over the life they had built. and what would happen if she decided to walk away from it. Tiffany was not the kind of woman to let a man define her. She had worked too hard to get where she was, and she wasn't about to let anyone take that away from her. But the thing about toxic relationships is that they don't always come with a clear escape route. The deeper you're in, the harder it is to break free. And by the time Tiffany realized just how dangerous things had become, it was already too late. The weight she had been carrying, the unease that had been lingering beneath the surface, it wasn't just stress, it wasn't just another rough patch. It was a warning, a sign that something was building, that something was coming. But no one could have predicted just how horrifying the ending would be. No one saw it coming, not in the way it happened. But in hindsight, the signs were always there, scattered across the weeks leading up to October 7, 2023. The unease in Tiffany's voice, the tension in her movements, the way she seemed to be pulling away as if she were trying to escape something even she couldn't fully define. By then, Tiffany and Armand were no longer the couple they once were. Whatever love had existed between them had soured, replaced by a toxic mix of resentment, control, and unresolved anger. Tiffany had made a decision. She was moving on. She had worked too hard, built too much, to be dragged down by a relationship that was no longer serving her. To those around her, it was clear she was trying to reclaim her life. But not everyone walks away without a fight. Armand wasn't just struggling with the breakup, he was unraveling. The man who had once been charming and attentive had grown erratic, his emotions unpredictable. He had a past, one that included time behind bars, and while Tiffany had once believed in his ability to change, she was beginning to see him in a different light. A man who felt entitled. A man who, when faced with the loss of control, became dangerous. Friends later recalled the tension that lingered in Tiffany's presence. She never said much, never fully explained what was going on behind closed doors, but there were moments, fleeting expressions, unfinished sentences, that hinted at a deeper fear. She wasn't just leaving a relationship, she was extracting herself from something that had the potential to explode. The fights had escalated. Some were over money, who owed what, who had the rights to certain things they had built together. Others were over property, who got to keep what, who had the final say. But beneath all of it was something even more volatile. A man who refused to accept that he had lost control. Tiffany had been firm. She was done. She had dreams that extended beyond Armand, ambitions that weren't tied to him, and most importantly, she had her own sense of self-worth, something she wasn't willing to compromise anymore. But that decision, that assertion of independence, had consequences. Armand had started showing up unexpectedly, places he never used to go. Friends mentioned seeing him around, hovering on the outskirts of Tiffany's world, watching, waiting. He was losing the grip he once had, and that loss fueled something inside him, something that festered with each passing day. Then came the threats, some subtle, woven into conversations in a way that left just enough doubt to avoid confrontation, others more direct, spoken in the heat of anger when the mask of civility slipped. Tiffany had heard them. She had felt the shift in his presence, but she refused to live in fear. She had worked too hard for that. Still, there was an undeniable sense of unease, a lingering feeling that things weren't truly over, that Armand wasn't the kind of man who simply walked away. On the outside, Tiffany kept moving forward. She continued running her business, engaging with her community, pushing forward as she always had. But beneath the surface, something was changing. The weight she carried was different now, heavier, like she knew deep down that the past wasn't done with her yet. And then the day came. It was a Saturday afternoon in North Philadelphia. The barbershop on West Lehigh Avenue was busy, filled with the usual weekend crowd. Conversations flowed, laughter echoed. The world outside kept moving, unaware that, for one woman, time was about to stop. No one inside knew that a storm had been brewing in the background, that what seemed like an ordinary day was anything but. No one knew that within moments, the tension that had been building for weeks, for months, was about to erupt in the most horrifying way possible. It happened fast, too fast for anyone to react, too fast for Tiffany to even process what was unfolding in front of her. A normal Saturday afternoon, a barbershop filled with the sounds of clippers buzzing, casual conversations, laughter from customers waiting their turn, the kind of place where people came to unwind, to talk, to feel safe. But in an instant, all of that shattered. Tiffany had come in for something routine, maybe a conversation, maybe just a visit, maybe nothing more than a moment to herself. But as she stood inside, the door opened, and a figure stepped in. And there was no argument, no raised voices, no time for anyone to register the danger before it was too late. Then gunfire. The first shot cracked through the air, a sound so sharp and violent that it didn't even seem real at first. The human brain isn't wired to process gunfire in places of normalcy. For the briefest second, there was confusion. Did something fall? Did something explode outside? But before those thoughts could even form, the second shot came, and then another. Panic set in. People dove for cover, tipping over chairs, scrambling to get away. A moment ago they had been laughing, talking, living. Now their world had become something unrecognizable, a crime scene unfolding in real time. And in the middle of it all, Tiffany was on the floor. The shots had torn through her, one in the torso, another in the head. The force had knocked her down almost instantly, her body crumpling before she even had a chance to register what was happening. Blood pooled beneath her, spreading outward, a stark contrast against the cold barbershop floor. The silence after the gunfire was deafening, the kind of silence that only comes when reality is too horrific to comprehend. The people inside were frozen, eyes darting between Tiffany's lifeless body and the figure who had pulled the trigger. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the shooter was gone, vanishing through the door as if nothing had happened. Sirens cut through the air within minutes. The flashing red and blue lights cast eerie reflections against the windows of the barbershop, illuminating the horror inside. Medics rushed in, their footsteps heavy, their voices urgent. But there was no saving her. At 2:04 p.m., Tiffany Wade was pronounced dead. Word spread fast. Within moments, the street outside was flooded with people, onlookers, friends, neighbors who had heard the commotion and came running. Some didn't even know what had happened yet. They just saw the tape being stretched across the entrance, the heavy police presence, the looks on people's faces, and then the whispers started. Who would do this? Was it a robbery? Did someone have a problem with her? But deep down, many already knew the answer. Even before the police made an announcement, before they confirmed any details, one name was already on everyone's lips. A name that had been circling around Tiffany for months. A name that carried weight, that carried history. Armand Hilton, Tiffany's ex, the man she had been trying to distance herself from, the man she had argued with over money, over property, over control. The moment the pieces started falling into place, the horror deepened. This wasn't a random act of violence. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong or a stray bullet from an argument that had nothing to do with her. This was intentional. This was personal. The police wasted no time. The evidence was undeniable. Witnesses inside the barbershop described the shooter, his movements, his face. Surveillance cameras in the area had caught him walking in, had captured the precise moment he entered the shop. They had footage of him fleeing, but by the time they put the pieces together, Armand was already gone. The city was now on edge. A man capable of walking into a public place in broad daylight, of executing someone he once claimed to love without hesitation, was out there, somewhere, and no one knew where he would go next. For Tiffany's family, the grief was immediate and overwhelming. She had been taken from them in a way that was almost too cruel to believe. One minute she was here, laughing, living, planning her future. The next, she was gone. But as much as grief consumed them, another emotion began to take hold, and the need for justice. Tiffany hadn't just been killed, she had been hunted. And the man who did it wasn't going to get away. The city was about to witness a manhunt unlike any other. North Philadelphia was gripped with unease. The name Armand Hilton was now more than just familiar, it was feared. The police had officially labeled him a fugitive, and the manhunt was in full swing. But Armand wasn't just some low-level criminal trying to evade capture. He was calculated, and he knew how to disappear. His face was everywhere. News stations broadcasted his image, urging the public to stay vigilant. Social media lit up with discussions, theories, and outrage. Some, who had known Tiffany personally, couldn't hold back their anger. They flooded the internet with posts about the woman she had been, about the man Armand was, and about how this tragedy had been preventable. Others speculated about where he might be hiding. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Armand had vanished. The police scoured his last known addresses, old neighborhoods, and places he was rumored to frequent, but each location came up empty. It was clear he had planned his escape well, and that's what made him even more dangerous. People who had crossed paths with Armand before the murder now had to look over their shoulders. There was no telling what he was thinking, what he might do next. Those close to Tiffany feared retaliation. Friends and family members were warned to stay alert, to report anything suspicious. No one knew if Armand had help, if he was staying with someone, or if he was simply moving in the shadows, staying one step ahead of the authorities. But no one could outrun a murder charge forever. Law enforcement pulled out every resource they had. Tips began to pour in, sightings, possible locations, even theories about how he might be getting around. Some claimed to have seen him slipping in and out of back alleys. Others insisted he was trying to leave the state. But with every promising lead there was frustration. He always seemed to be gone before they arrived. The search extended beyond Pennsylvania. The possibility of Armand fleeing across state lines wasn't just an idea, it was a very real concern. Interstate law enforcement was looped in. His profile was sent out across different agencies. If he was trying to get out of Philadelphia, he wouldn't make it easy for them to track him. And then there was the question no one could ignore. Why? Why had he done this? To some, the answer seemed obvious. Control. Armand had lost it, and that was something men like him couldn't handle. Tiffany had been moving on, detaching herself from the toxicity, reclaiming her life. And for a man like Armand, that wasn't just rejection, it was humiliation. It was a personal attack. But others wondered if something more had pushed him over the edge. In the days before Tiffany's murder, had there been a final conversation, a final push that made him snap? Did he show up at that barber shop knowing exactly what he was about to do? Or had something in that moment sealed her fate? Whatever the reason, the reality remained the same. Tiffany was gone, and her killer was on the loose. Time was running out. The longer Armand stayed hidden, the harder it would be to find him. Law enforcement knew that, the public knew that, and more importantly, Armand knew that. He had one choice: keep running or face what he had done. But Armand Hilton wasn't ready to face what he had done. He kept running. Days turned into weeks, and he remained a fugitive, evading capture, while the city mourned Tiffany Wade. The streets of North Philadelphia carried a weight that was hard to describe. Murals and makeshift memorials appeared, honoring Tiffany's life. Candles, flowers, and handwritten notes lined the sidewalk near the barbershop where she had taken her last breath. Her friends and family refused to let her name be forgotten. Social media turned into a battleground of emotions: grief, anger, and frustration. People demanded justice. They wanted Armand found, held accountable for what he had done, but they also wanted answers. Could this tragedy have been avoided? Were there warning signs, cries for help that had gone unheard? Some believed Tiffany had seen this coming, that in the final weeks of her life she had been trying to escape a situation she knew was dangerous. Others questioned how someone could commit such an act in broad daylight and still manage to disappear without a trace. Theories circulated. Did Armand have help? Was he still in Philadelphia, or had he managed to slip away, blending into another city where no one knew his face? As the days passed, law enforcement continued their search. They followed every lead, tracked every tip, but Armand remained elusive. He had become more than just a man on the run. He was a ghost. But no fugitive stays hidden forever. Tiffany's loved ones held vigils, pushing for more media coverage, keeping her case alive. They wanted to make sure that no matter where Armand was, he knew he couldn't escape the truth. Every time he turned on the news, scrolled through the internet, or looked over his shoulder, he would see her face, hear her name, and be reminded of what he had done. The tragedy of Tiffany Wade was more than just a single act of violence. It was a reflection of a much larger issue, one that played out in countless other homes, in relationships that seemed fine on the surface, but were slowly being consumed by control and obsession. People whispered the same haunting question: could this happen again? For Tiffany's family, the pain would never fully go away. The birthdays, the holidays, the moments she should have been there for, those were stolen from her. Her future was taken in an instant, and all that remained were memories. But they refused to let her legacy end in tragedy. Her story became a conversation starter, a reminder that love should never come at the cost of safety. Friends, colleagues, even strangers began speaking out about their own experiences, recognizing warning signs they had ignored in their own lives. If Tiffany's story could save even one person from the same fate, then her voice would live on. And as for Armand Hilton, justice always has a way of catching up to those who think they can outrun it. It wasn't a matter of if he would be found, it was only a matter of when. If you believe no one should have their life stolen at the hands of someone they once trusted, subscribe to the channel. Only those who think this kind of tragedy should continue would refuse.